Sometimes it's very important to randomly shuffle elements or create a random floating point number or a random integer between two different digits. And in Python, it's very easy. We just have to import the random module and use some of the functions. Some very popular functions within the random modules are random function, randint function, choice function, shuffle function, and sample function. So let's take a look at them one by one. The first one would be random function. To use any of these functions, like I said, we would have to import random module. We could do this to import the random module. But since I'm using multiple functions within this module, there's an alternate way to do that. And I would say from random import all. And that way I could import any of the functions within the random module. And the first example I want to show is random function. The random function is used to generate random float numbers between 0.0 and 1. So when we run this, it would print a value anywhere between 0.0 and 1. We can run this multiple times, and each time it will give us new random floating number. How can we use this function to generate random floating numbers between 0 and 100? Well, that's easy to do it. We just have to multiply this by 100 and run it. Every time we run, we get a random value between 0 and 100. Another function I want to talk about is randint function. And in randint, as you saw, when I started typing randint, it needs or it requires two arguments, a and b. And a and b are basically nothing but the starting and ending values. So let's say I want to start with -5 and 5. What this does is it just generates a random integer between this range of -5 and 5, and both will be included, by the way. So every time you run this, it would generate a new integer value between and including -5 to 5. So as you saw here, it's speaking out, it's giving out -5 in this case. We keep running and keep getting new integer values. So it's a very helpful and easy way to generate random integer values given any range of numbers. Another function that's very useful is a choice function, which is used to return a random item from a sequence. For example, a list, tuple, string, or a range. So for this, I need a sequence. Let's say I have a sequence of 5 numbers. And as a print statement, like a previous print statement. And in this case, I want to choose a random number from my sequence. So here I have a range of length 5. So there are 5 items in there. And every time I use this choice function, I'm basically choosing one of those random numbers from 0 to 4. So in this case, it's choosing 0. I keep running and keep getting new outputs. So I'm randomly choosing any one of those 5 numbers from the list that is provided as argument. We could do similar thing. Instead of using a range, we could try with a string. And here in this example, I have an encourage as my string. And every time I do random choice, I keep getting a new random character as an output. We could also do with a tuple of Boolean values. So let's say I have a choice to make between true and false, or left or right, and then I keep running this and keep getting random choice to go either left or right, or something is true or false. It's not limited to only these data types. I can also include a list and show you here. So in this case, I have a sequence of 0 to 10, or integers from 0 to 10. And every time I run this choice function, I am basically choosing a random number from that list. Next thing I want to talk about is a shuffle function, which is used to shuffle a sequence, example, a list in place. So I already have a list here. I'm just going to basically use the same example list. And to use a shuffle function, I do something like this. So shuffle is my function, and I have to put the list as my argument that I want to shuffle. And one thing you notice is I'm not assigning this to any variable or anything at all, because it doesn't necessarily return anything when we use the shuffle function. But let's see and run this. So this was my original list, 0 through 10 in order. And when I shuffle, it created 0 to 10, but in random orders. We could run this multiple times and get new output each time we run them. Because shuffle function is used to shuffle items in sequence in place, and since string and tuples are immutable data types, using this shuffle functions to modify strings and tuples will raise an error. We can try this with sequence, our previous string example experiment. So let's say my sequence is an experiment here, which is a list of characters or character string. This will result in type error because string will not support item assignment. So when we run this, we get type error, and it shows you exactly why. To get around this, we will need sample method instead of shuffle method. Also, if you noticed, like I explained, when using this shuffle, nothing is returned, but the original list is shuffled in place, which means we lost the original order of items in this list. So if you still want the original order of the items, we could use sample function, which will be the next thing that I want to discuss. So for sample function, it returns a new shuffled list. However, to use sample method, we will have to pass two arguments. The first argument will be the original list. So let's go back to our original sequence of list, our list of numbers. So this is our original sequence, and instead of shuffle, I want to use new sequence. So when I use the sample method, I will pass two arguments: my sequence as my original list, and then the length of my new list that I want to create. So in this case, I'm saying I'll take a list. I don't know how long that list is, but I want 5 items out of there. And when I run this and print, it would print out only 5 items from there. Oh, I forgot to print. I only printed new sequence, but I forgot to print my new sequence. So here, when I run this, this was the original list, and then this is the 5 items sampled from that list. In your output list, when you run the sample, if you want the same number of items, all you have to do is make 11 here, because this has 11 items. And when you run this, it would give you a random order of all the samples from that list with all 11 values shuffled around. Oftentimes, our list is very lengthy and we don't know how long it is, or it's not feasible to count. So, in that case, we just have to do length function to find the length of that sequence. And when we run this, we would still get the similar output from the last example. This example even works with strings. So let's go back to a string instead of a list here. And when I say my new sequence, sample my sequence, length my sequence, this is everything still remains the same. If I run this, my input was experiment, and I get this output, which is a list of all the character strings, but sample around or shuffle around as in different samples or random samples. The output here is a new list, and we need to join each of these back into string formats if we want to maintain the original format or data type. Because our input was a string, our output now is a list. So there's a way to get around that using a join function. So my sequence, my new sequence, and then I want to say let's try to join them. So the try join would be my new variable name dot join, and I want to join back my new sequence here. And when I print this, it should join all our items back together to form one string. So what's happening here is basically we started with our experiment string series, experiment string, and then we sampled that using the length of that string. So here, whatever the length of the string is, it's basically sampling that and putting the text around. But then the sample method will output the items as a list, not back into a string, as we saw here. So with this print new sequence, we're just printing the items of this list that is created from the sample method. And then finally, we are using the join method to join the items back into a single string here and printing that out. This technique can be very useful and powerful tool. We will use this technique in our as our lesson learned here in making our first project that's very soon upcoming. And highly likely that project will be our random password generator. So stay tuned for that. So that's it for this video. Just to recap, in this video, we looked at some of the very useful built-in functions in Python, including range function, the random function, randint function, choice, shuffle, and sample functions within the random module. I hope you like this video. Please don't forget to share, subscribe, like, and comment on this. Also hit that bell button if you want to get timely notifications. Until next time, thank you.